was waiting for the sirens to pass. It's 11:11. Okay, had to make a wish. Or do a prayer, really. Anywho, like I said, it's 11:11 at night. For whatever reason, I keep recording at night, later at night than I anticipate, but it's okay. I do not want to be here all night, and I don't want to take too much time with this intro, especially because this is going to be a very long video. Hopefully this is in focus so I can begin right about now. Okay. I think I'm just nervous. Sometimes I like ramble a little bit in the beginning because I'm nervous. I think I should give the disclaimer right away. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to start so I don't take up too much time with this intro. First things first, I do want to say a quick disclaimer. This is a huge trigger warning. So if you are sensitive to themes along the lines of child abuse, domestic violence, sexual abuse, animal cruelty or animal abuse, trafficking, kidnapping, things that sound like that, bullying, if you're sensitive to, like, you know, family conflict, being held at gunpoint, any kind of trauma, like any topics or conversations about trauma and PTSD and stuff, then you really shouldn't watch this video. I'm not saying that like some kind of mind trick for you to watch. I'm literally saying that this whole thing is like, this whole video is going to be just one big trigger warning, like, or just you're gonna be triggered possibly if you're sensitive to stuff like that, as I am, or as am I. So that's why I'm saying that, first and foremost. And of course I'll put that in the description. I will put trigger warning in the title if I can fit it, but I can't list all of those things in the title, like child abuse and, you know, being like home invasions, being held at gunpoint. I can't put all that in the title. So that's why I want to say that right now and just at the start of this video. Another thing I just wanted to say is, in this document that I'm going to read, this synopsis, I reference the number 25 years. I say for the past 25 years. It is because I wrote this last year in 2025 at the very end of the year. I actually wrote it the day after Thanksgiving, Dia de Acción de Gracias. So, and at the time I was 26. My birthday was 2 weeks ago at the end of December. So, of course, this was already written. So I said 25 years a lot. I was 26 at the time. So I don't think that matters that much. It doesn't really change anything, but the correct number would be 26 years now. So when I say for the past 25 years, you could correct it to 26 years in your head if you want to. It doesn't really change much of anything, but just wanted to make that little disclaimer. I don't know that there are any other disclaimers. I think I did want to say just a little tidbit. I almost did not do this series. I almost did not do this video. I almost did not do this tonight. I almost did not do like this whole project. I have wanted to share like the story of my journey before, during, and after my emancipation at the age of 16 for quite some time now. And anyone can look back on my channel and you can see that I tried. Like, you can see that there are stories that I told, but I would get scared every single time because I like do have younger siblings and older siblings, and at the time, you know, being like, you know, 18, 19, and 20, I was more concerned with like my younger siblings. And I think in general, like when you've gone through like a lot of trauma and everybody around you normalizes it, and you fall into the hands of people who keep abusing you and exploiting you, it's easy to fall into the mindset that you should just like be quiet, don't say anything, and just try to survive. Like, if there's one thing I know I am, it's a survivalist. Like, I know how to survive, but I'm not here just to survive. I have not enjoyed my time here on this earth. I have been very grateful for the past, 6 or 7 years of my life that I have been more independent and away from a lot of the people who will come up in this synopsis that I'm going to read. But there were still, of course, a lot of, toxic things that led me to be quiet and made it difficult for me to see how much pain I have been carrying. And one thing that is for sure is I don't want to carry it anymore. I believe wholeheartedly the pain that I have been, like the physical pain that I've been in for the past 2 years, literally since 2023, my body has been like breaking down. I had no like health issues, at least not like physical health issues, prior to the age of 24. And then I think I got to a breaking point in 2023 because every aspect of my life was just really bad. My relationship, the quality of my environment, like as in the place that I lived in, and just everything. A lot of things were really bad for me at the time. And honestly, only the things that I created, like my notebooks and my personal development course and like my art, is what kept me and my mind strong during that time. Because like I'm truly an artist and fueled by the desire to create art and express myself through the art. But it was a very difficult time for me. And I think that for 24 years, I was able to keep going and keep running, right? Like a true warrior. But that was 24 years too long, and it got to the point where I couldn't take anymore. My body was just breaking down. I became riddled with symptoms and like physical pain that I've literally been dealing with every single day. Every single day I drink turmeric tea. Almost every single day I put on a pain relief patch or I put on pain relief creams. And it's been a very difficult and slow journey with these healthcare professionals that I've seen. But very recently, I talked to one who told me that a lot of the pain that I've been dealing with may be connected to, or is very likely connected to, the fact that I've been carrying all this pain in my body, all this PTSD, all this trauma in my body for all this time, and for the most part silently. It wasn't until I began to perform on my high school's spoken word poetry team, the slam poetry or spoken word poetry team that I was on for junior and senior year. It wasn't until then that I was able to even see that I was carrying a lot of pain. I didn't realize the severity at the time or the intensity at the time, but I was the spoken word poet who couldn't speak. I would get on the stage and break down crying in the midst of talking about these things, and it's because it was my first time saying any of the things I had gone through out loud. So if there's one thing, like if you who's watching this video, if I get the courage to post it, honestly, if there's one thing I would say is don't take too long. Don't let it take you 26 or 24, 27 years. Don't let it take you so long, especially if you are one of the children who's reached out to me in the past about your concerns for emancipation and what you're going through. I would say stop protecting your abusers. Anyone listening to this, stop protecting your abusers. You don't want to end up riddled with medical issues, health issues, and symptoms and pain when you're so young. I am so young, and I feel like a 46-year-old woman with 2 kids. I don't have a kid. I feel like a divorced 46-year-old woman and 2 kids, like as if I have the stress of someone in that position. And it's because my whole life I've been stressed out. My whole life I've been in pain. My whole life I've been abused and exploited, literally falling into the hands of bad, poor quality people who don't care about the impact that their actions and their words have on anyone around them. And it's because they don't ever expect anyone to say anything about it. They expect you to stay quiet. I'm done being quiet. Anyone who's watching my videos, you could tell all I do is talk. I'm a very talkative person. But I was a very quiet child because I was uncomfortable. But I do not want to be uncomfortable in my body and in my life. Like I said, I've not enjoyed my time here on this earth, but I am not suicidal. And I'm not someone who wants to walk around here on this planet sad or riddled with sorrow, filled with sorrow. there are other emotions, more positive emotions I feel all throughout the day, sure, because I force myself to find gratitude and joy. I force myself to do something every day to make me feel better, but it doesn't take away what I've been carrying. And lately I've heard a lot of signs, like from people saying, just finally speak your truth. Like, your breakthrough is in your voice. Your breakthrough is in you breaking yours. It comes with you breaking your silence. So that is what I want to do. I didn't mean for this intro to be so long, but what's new, right? So yes, that is what led me to finally, or that's a kind of like a summary of what led me to finally sit down and post not just this tonight, but the past 4 videos, I believe, that are uploaded, or that have been uploaded before this one in this series, the Emancipated Star. Like I said, this was written back in November. The videos were recorded, the videos that are up right now, they were recorded in October, but I got scared again. And I think it's just the negative self-talk, the self-doubt, the thinking that nobody cares, nobody needs to hear from me, because nobody needs to hear. It's not like they need to hear from me, but I also don't need anyone to need me for me to find the courage, or for me to finally speak. Like, I don't need permission for anyone to speak. I think I've just been afraid and considering how other people would feel. But you know what I realized when I was crying last year, the day after Thanksgiving, and all throughout that week, is that nobody cares about how I feel. None of the people who I'm about to talk about in this synopsis that I wrote, none of these people care. I know that they don't care. I know they don't lose sleep about what they did to me. Yes, I sit here and I lose sleep because of the pain that I'm in. I lose sleep because of the inability to trust. The fact that I feel scared in this world. Yeah, no more. So that is why I have so much to say now. That is why I'm going to say it now. I'm going to say it now. So I didn't mean for this to take so long, but if you are still with me, thank you. And as I said, trigger warning. Seriously, trigger warning.
In an instant, anatomy all I see, and the lights get up, and the lights get up.
Bueno, so I'm not sure if I look as orange as I did a moment ago, but hopefully not, because honestly, I don't even, it's whatever. So anywho, I'm gonna try my best to like clip this part and just throw this in there without disrupting like the whole video. So basically, lo que pasó, what happened is that I recorded the video. If this goes like I think it's gonna go, then what has happened is, so far, if you're watching this video, then you probably saw like, I don't know, 12 minutes or something, and then now you're seeing this video. The reason you're seeing this video is because the rest of the footage that I recorded is not salvageable. There were audio issues, technical issues, and I didn't realize it. Of course, while I was recording, it wasn't until I began to edit the video later on that I realized that there's a ticking noise in the back, and it's because I used this microphone that came with my camera. I bought this camera years ago. This microphone came with the camera, but for whatever reason, it's no good. Like, it's no wonder for my thing. It just causes this like ticking noise or whatever. So I don't know if I even used like the first 10-12 minutes of the footage that I had that I recorded the other day, then there you may even be able to hear a ticking noise. Of course, like I'll do my best to like reduce it. If I can't reduce it, then I will like throw the whole thing away, and then like you won't see any of that footage. But I did make a disclaimer, and I spoke for like 8 minutes or something, and I spoke from my heart like I always do. So I did not want to throw all of that away, because I wasn't gonna like re-record that. I'm not gonna re-record that. I'm just going to read the synopsis that I mentioned in the first part of the video that I said I was gonna read. I'm gonna read that synopsis, and I'm just gonna basically like pick up where I left off. But I just wanted to say, there have been so many freaking spiritual attacks since the beginning of me attempting this project and like attempting to upload it, the very first video that I uploaded, literally the night that I was working on that, like editing it, I got up to use the restroom, and it's like late at night, and like this painting that I have in a, it's not a painting, it's like a drawing in a frame. It was nowhere near me. Like I didn't touch it, I didn't pass it or anything like that. It just fell over like randomly, and then it cracked, or it shattered. So I had to take like 30 minutes to clean up the glass and, you know, clean the floor and everything like that. And I've had that in the position it was in for probably like a year or so. That's never happened before. Never. But when I'm sitting down to work on something and to say things I've never said before, and, you know, do this very brave, courageous task, right, of telling my life story, sharing my testimony, essentially, that's when all of this pura mierda starts to happen. And then like today, or yeah, today when I was editing and I saw that there are all these technical issues, like, it's just so discouraging and it's so frustrating. But I'm a very spiritual person, and I believe it's all intentional. I believe all of these like spiritual attacks, all of these little things are meant to deter me, because I'm doing something I've never done before, and I'm doing something that is very brave. Even I literally woke up like 2 weeks ago, and look at this. I literally have scratches. It literally looks like somebody, I don't even know if the camera's showing it. Look at this. It literally looks like someone like scratched me like this. I don't, and then these have been fading a little bit, so I did put some amla on it like earlier, and I've put oils and stuff, so it's probably not like showing up like that much. But literally I woke up one day, and like I woke up, I think like this was like 2 weeks ago, I woke up with like a whole set of scratches like this, and I have like 2 on my back. It just seems like there's all this spiritual warfare that I have been enduring, and I do believe that it is something spiritual that does not, it's the demons that will not be allowed to create more victims when I speak up and other people speak up about how these demons and these demonic people operate. That's why whenever you're trying to do something that's monumental, that's brave, that's outside of your norm, you'll find all these like tests along the way, but it's to deter you. It's so that you don't add to your testimony what it is that you want to. But I will not let it discourage me. It irritated me, but whatever. There are worse things. It's so freaking annoying, you know? Ugh, like, it's late. I don't have time for this. I need to work still. My dinner is literally over there waiting for me. I'm irritated. I'm a little irritated. And I know that reading this is not going to put me in a better mood. But I know that if I tell myself, oh, I'm annoyed, I'm not going to do it, nothing gets done, nothing changes. And people keep on creating victims. So instead of letting the irritation silence me, I'm going to let it propel me forward, okay? But I'm irritated right now. This is me irritated. I don't think I've captured that on my channel before, but anyway, whatever. So hopefully this isn't too long like of a segue and like too much of a disruption in the middle of the video. But I just had to say this because yes, I am basically like redoing this video, or I'm just redoing the part where I read it. And I just so happened to be wearing like the same shirt that I was wearing, the same tank top I was wearing the other day when I recorded it like last week or whatever. But yeah, that wasn't like on purpose. I just finished a meeting, and then I realized like, oh, I need to re-record this because I can't use the footage that I wanted to use. And I was like, oh wow, I'm wearing the same thing, so I definitely take it as a sign that I should do it. I'm gonna drink some water, and then I'm gonna begin. Oi. Okay. One no, because it's late as heck. Like my hair and everything. Like, ugh. But I was like, you know what? I'm not even gonna try to like fix myself up and put on proper clothing. I'm just gonna do this. One no. And something I may do is just record audio and do like an audio only instead of like video and audio. I may just do like an audio recording of me reading the synopsis and just upload that separately so that the video isn't so long, and then it just doesn't have like all of the extra context and stuff that I may share. So anywho, let me begin. Let me put this on because I don't know what it is about, like, I say that it makes me feel enveloped, which it does, but yeah. Alrighty. Alright, I do want to say that, in case I may not have mentioned this in the part of the like former video that I did, this is a very long document, so like if I didn't say this in the previous thing, I may be here for a while. You may be here for a while with me because it's a long document. Single space, it's like 17 pages. So yeah, alrighty. Also, super huge trigger warning. I may have that part already in the video, but yeah, super huge trigger warning. Like, I apologize in advance. Alrighty. This is the Emancipated Star. This is the story of my life so far. This is some of my testimony. Oh wait, let me do something. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot something. Thank God that I realized I needed to turn off my sound machine. Oh my gosh, otherwise I would be sitting here a third time. Oh my God, like, Dios mío, que no. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I thought about that. Bueno. I'm just gonna like take a minute. Okay. The Emancipated Star, so far. Hello, my name is Starlini. I was born in Illinois in late December 1998, then placed into Florida State foster care at approximately 5 months young in May 1999. According to documents, my birth family was on a family vacation in Florida at the time that my 4 older siblings and I were taken by Florida DCF, or Department of Children and Families, and placed into neighboring foster homes. The separation occurred after several calls were made to an abuse hotline by people who reported my birth parents for domestic violence, threatening harm to children, and inadequate supervision in the Efficiency Motel that all 7 of us were staying in for a few months in Florida. For the next 7 years, I was placed in a foster home with one of my biological sisters, while my other 3 siblings were placed in other homes nearby. In my foster home, there were a total of 4 foster girls and 4 kids who were the grandchildren of my foster mother. I slept in a bunk bed in a basement that did not meet Florida State's requirements for a quote-unquote legal bedroom. When caseworkers came, I was instructed to place my toys in one of the 2 bedrooms upstairs and to lie by saying that my sister and I slept in that official bedroom when it was actually the eldest granddaughter of my foster mother who slept in that room alone. It is against Florida law for foster children to share a bed. Between the 2 bedrooms upstairs that belonged to the grandchildren, there were 3 beds in those rooms. There were 4 foster girls in the home. Thus, if the caseworkers believed that we had all had our own bed, they would have still figured that at least one foster child was sleeping in one of the bunk beds downstairs in the small, dimly lit basement with concrete flooring, no entry door, and 2 boys sleeping on their quote-unquote side of the basement. There was a small utility closet room that was used as a bedroom by my foster mother's adult daughter, and her 2 younger sons slept on the other side of the wall with their beds in front of a deep freezer. It is against Florida law for children of the same gender to sleep in the same room, and a bedroom is not considered a basement is not considered an official bedroom. There is no way that the caseworkers knew the state law and didn't see that the condition of the foster home was in violation of it. Yet, I remained in the foster home for 7 years with no privacy and no official bedroom to call my own. This oversight and failure by my foster mother and the caseworkers led to one of the children in the foster home sexually abusing me when he was age 12 and I was in kindergarten at age 5. The boys often came downstairs and saw all of us foster girls disrobing, which made me feel violated and unsafe before and after the rape due to his easy access to me. My foster mother, a middle-aged woman, was also severely abusive to my birth sister, myself, and the other small children in the home who were her grandsons. One common practice of hers was to discipline all of us children for the wrongdoings of one by making us line up, pull our pants down, bend over the couch, armrest, with our genitals exposed, and beating us profusely with a belt or switch, which is a tree branch that she would make us fetch from outside prior to the abuse. During these beatings, we were all forced to watch one another be abused, and we were exposed to each other's genitals. I began to experience this abuse likely as early as age 4. Thus, I believe that my foster brother began to sexualize my body from seeing me getting dressed in the basement and seeing my bare vagina when I was forced to pull my pants down in front of him at the start of a beating. While my foster brother was in the midst of sexually assaulting me, I witnessed one of the teenage foster girls come downstairs to the basement, crouch down by my bunk bed, and watch my brother on top of me as he was performing an oral sex act on me, and I struggled to wiggle from his body weight keeping me down. She licked her lips, watched for some time, as if she were amazed, then crept back upstairs, leaving him to continue the assault. I lost consciousness after that and don't remember how it ended. I do remember crying in the bed, thinking that, quote unquote, I am dirty now, and that God would hate me because I am dirty later that same evening. When she returned home, I begged my foster mother with tears in my eyes to allow me to shower alone from that point forward, instead of with my birth sister as per the usual routine. After she gave me permission, I went into the shower and attempted to clean away what made me feel, quote unquote, dirty. My vaginal hole was open, which hadn't been the case before, so I accidentally got a piece of the soap bar stuck deep inside of my vagina while bathing myself. I screamed out in agony, and my foster mother's granddaughter came into the bathroom to help. I had to allow her to dig her fingers inside of my vagina with a washcloth in order to remove all pieces of the soap, leaving me feeling even more violated. She said to me, "How did you even get that up there?" But nothing else was said to me. No one talked to me about the assault on my body that took place that night. No one provided me with counseling. No one separated the boy from the basement level, thus he continued to sleep less than 10 feet away from me. I went on to experience nightmares daily. I began wetting the bed. I began sucking my fingers from anxiety that he would rape me again, and worst of all, I began masturbating at age 5. I could not go to sleep without feeling a strong sensation in between my legs and discovered that humping my teddy bear was the only way to make the feeling go away. I went on to be disgusted with myself for the next 12 years, thinking that I was gross, that I was a freak, and that I was at fault for not being, quote unquote, strong enough to push a 12-year-old boy off of my kindergarten age small body. No one gave me the vocabulary to process what had happened to me. In fact, when my birth sister and I were transferred to our birth parents 2 years after that incident, when I was age 7, my sister said to me, "If you don't do my chores for me, then I'll tell everyone in the house that you had sex with our foster brother." She was 9 at the time and held my trauma against me. At the time, I thought, is that what you call what he did to me? It wasn't until I was 17, a junior in high school, that I learned that what he did to me was sexual assault. And it was by learning the stories of other girls who had endured the same tragedy. The physical abuse in the foster home continued for the entire time that I lived there, and it was administered the most brutally to us foster girls. For example, I vividly recall my foster mother forcing one of the teenage foster girls to get on her knees, put her hands behind her back, form herself like a dog, and eat dog food from the dog's bowl as a form of punishment. On another occasion, the other teenage foster girl was caught drinking from a 1-liter bottle of orange soda late in the evening. My foster mother called the remaining 3 foster girls upstairs and made us watch as she stood with a belt in her hand and told the girl to keep drinking. The foster girl began to projectile vomit all over the kitchen tile and into the bottle of orange soda. My foster mother tightened her grip on the belt and told her to keep drinking. The foster child was forced to drink her own vomit along with the soda for simply acting on her thirst and venturing into the kitchen after dinner time. My foster mother was very strict and often forbade us to eat, since we were often hungry down in the basement. My biological sister would sneak food. However, she would torture me by telling me that if I wanted a piece of her Pop-Tart or a snack that she had, then I had to, quote unquote, lick her armpit, quote unquote, lick the floor, or lick a strange surface that she would point to. On one occasion, I was so hungry that I pretended to lick a black spot on the faux wooden floor, thinking that she would share one of her 2 Pop-Tarts with me. My sister broke off a small corner piece and tossed it at me. My birth sister treated me poorly in the foster home for reasons unknown to me. Therefore, I had no friends in the foster home. I often clung to my toys or my schoolwork to avoid getting beaten with the other children whose mother would beat them frequently when she came home angry. When my foster mother wasn't around, her adult daughter would beat my birth sister and I too. Yet none of these things could be safely reported to a caseworker because they always interviewed me in front of an adult. On one occasion, I vividly remember being interviewed by a caseworker while my foster mom's adult daughter sat close by at the dining table with a belt in her hand sprawled across her lap. I felt so defeated and stunned that the woman's social worker had proceeded with the interview despite this clear intimidation tactic. All of the caseworkers who came to the foster home failed me. They overlooked the fact that my foster mother was housing foster children in an illegal manner and chose not to note this on any of the announced visit reports that I have retrieved. However, it was ultimately the state of Florida and its DCF that failed by approving my foster mother's home as a legal and legitimate foster home despite it not meeting legal standards. Florida State went on to fail me even greater by removing me from the foster home and placing me back into my birth parents' custody in December 2006 when the state of Illinois had just terminated my birth parents' right to their sixth child just 1 month prior in November 2006. My birth parents had their sixth child in February 2001, despite the fact that 5 of their children were in foster homes in Florida at the time, and despite working with an interstate child welfare agency to show that they were suitable to care for their children if we were to be returned. The agency conducted a home study in December 2000, which was unfavorable. My birth parents also lied about being pregnant while the study was conducted. It wasn't until 3 months later during a welfare check that a caseworker learned that another child had been born into the dysfunction. That child was taken shortly after birth due to my birth mother hallucinating during her prenatal appointments. She had already had 3 psychiatric hospitalizations prior to when I was born in 1998 as well. The history of domestic abuse from my birth father towards my birth mother, along with her diagnosis of being acutely psychotic, also proved her to be a risk. So their sixth child was placed into foster care in the state of Illinois right away. From 2001 to 2006, the state of Illinois gathered immense evidence that showed my birth parents' parental unfitness. Another home study was done in August 2002, where my birth parents lied once again about my birth mother not having any more children. Their 7th child was born just 4 months later in December 2002. They also demonstrated inability to provide contact or child care for their 6th child, who was in state custody, nor the 5 of us children who were in foster homes in Florida. My birth parents continued to deny claims of domestic abuse, despite my birth mother's previous claims that my father did abuse her when they were in the motel in Miami in 1999, and despite him being arrested for domestic violence 3 times in Illinois state prior to 1998. During the home study, my father stated that he knew my birth mother could not care for her children because of her mental illness and blamed the claims of domestic abuse on the quote-unquote problems in her head instead of him taking accountability for his actions. They also claimed that they needed financial aid since my birth mother could not work and stated that they couldn't find anyone from the church to provide child care if their 6th child and the 5 of us in foster homes were to be returned. Yet my birth mother gave birth to her 7th child in December of that year, 2002. And to make matters worse, my father placed a 2-month-old baby, his mentally ill wife, and himself in a vehicle and drove from Illinois to Florida to retrieve his 3 oldest children that were in the foster home. A Florida judge returned my 3 older siblings to my birth parents in early February 2003, despite the fact that no home study provided to Florida Department of Children and Families by the interstate agency was favorable. In fact, in 2006, during the final hearing regarding my parents' rights to their 6th child, a caseworker testified that the judge placed those 3 children back into my parents' custody without the interstate compact in place, a home study done, nor consent from a state agency. Yet, Nothing was done by Illinois Department of Children and Family Services to ensure that all 4 children in my birth parents' care were safe from neglect, harm, and abuse. It is because of the Florida judge's conscious indifference and the failure of Illinois DCFS that my birth parents were reunited with their children illegitimately and illegally. And it is because of this huge oversight that my incompetent, unfit birth parents had the audacity to retrieve the last 2 of their children from the foster homes during their second attempt. Sometime in late 2005, my foster mother permitted my birth parents to make contact with my birth sister and I, first by telephone and then in person on one occasion. She allowed us to attend a court hearing alone with our father in November 2005, despite the fact that he had no rights to be alone with my sister and I. I also do not believe that Florida State granted my birth parents permission to visit us in the home to have a family dinner. According to the few court documents that I have, the goal of the hearing in November 2005 was reunification, and the concurrent goal was adoption. Given my foster mother's abusive and neglectful behavior and my birth parents' grave incompetence, negligence, and abusive history, neither of those goals were favorable to me. However, it is clear that Florida State did not take into account the findings of the 3 unfavorable home studies conducted by the Interstate Child Welfare Agency in December 2000, August 2002, and December 2004, nor the fact that my birth parents intentionally withheld notice of the births of 4 children in February 2001, December 2002, November 2004, and July 2006 from the state agencies, nor the fact that they had failed to make contact with their birth children in the Florida State foster homes since 1999, nor the fact that 3 more calls were made to Illinois DCFS abuse hotlines after the first 3 children were returned, nor the fact that my birth parents stated that my father, a sole provider, had to work full and overtime, and that my birth mother could still become psychotic while on the medication her doctor prescribed, per the psychiatrist himself. The state of Florida disregarded the fact that the first 2 children demonstrated behavioral problems, with one of them reporting, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but I'll just say demonstrating behavioral problems, and with one of them reporting them, and with the other child having missed 45 days of school during kindergarten, to which my father said he was completely surprised by. The video just stopped recording. I don't know why it does that sometimes, but I'm going to keep reading. The Florida DCF received all 3 of the home study files that were conducted by the Interstate Child Welfare Agency prior to the hearing in November 2005. Yet the Florida State caseworker still motioned for my birth parents to be reunited with my older sister and I, who remained in the foster home in Miami during this time. The final hearing during which my birth mother's parental rights were terminated occurred in November 2006. Approximately weeks later, my biological sister and I were taken from my foster home one afternoon by a woman caseworker, forced to stay in an office building until nightfall, then picked up by a male caseworker who drove us through the night to a gas station for snacks and ultimately to Opa-locka Airport, where he handed us to a complete stranger. My sister and I were placed on a plane by ourselves at the young ages of 7 and 9. Then we were greeted by a stewardess who knew me by name and asked if I wanted the chicken Caesar salad for my dinner. When the American Airlines plane landed in Illinois, a new stranger retrieved my sister and I and pulled our little bodies through the airport by our arms. When we arrived in front of a set of sliding doors, a brown-skinned man emerged and my sister took off running in his direction excitedly. The stranger, who was still holding my hand, asked me, "Is that your dad?" To which I responded, "I don't know." He then finally looked at me, saw the fear in my eyes, and said, "What do you mean you don't know?" At that point, my birth father had pulled me from him, thanked the man, and said, "I've got it from here, boss. Thank you." From that moment forward, I went on to experience the worst 8 years of my entire life. On that very first night, I was not greeted warmly by the 6 children that were in my birth parents' custody, nor did I remember the older 3 who were placed into different foster homes. For this reason, I did not feel safe and believed that I had been kidnapped. I began to cry for my foster mother, beg for my birth parents to take me home, and scream for her by her government name. I was picked up by my birth father, who attempted to console me as my 7-year-old body kicked and screamed in his arms for him to let me down. He kept asking me, "Who is your mom?" To which I cried out my foster mother's name. My father then set me down on the floor, and my birth mother came around him and slapped me so hard in the face. She began screaming at me, "That's not your mom. I'm your mom, Star. Do you hear me? Don't you ever say that again." I could not see anything because my birth mother had slapped me so hard that my vision went blurry. After that moment, my father pulled the newborn and 2 toddlers from the room that they shared with my birth mother and quote-unquote assigned each one of them to my 2 older sisters and I. He listed all of our chores and told us that if he were to ever hear from our birth mother that we did not care for the children properly, then we would get a quote-unquote beat down. Okay. From that day forward, from that day at age 7 and onward, I went on to experience these threats of physical and sexual abuse from my birth father regularly. I also went on to experience physical beatings and threats of being killed by my birth mother perennially, meaning all year round. On a weekly basis, I was beaten with a belt and kicked in the stomach until I urinated on myself, starting from the time I was in the 2nd grade. Due to how impoverished we were only able to wash clothes at the local laundromat once a month. Thus, I would get up from the floor after a beating, clean up my urine, and then hand wash my jeans with shampoo in hopes that they would be dry in time for me to re-wear them to school the next day. On one occasion when I was in the 3rd grade, my birth mother called me into her room and began to insult me like the physical beatings would usually begin. After her routine of calling me ugly and stating that my voice was quote-unquote too rough like a man's voice, she then sank her nails into my veins until I began to scream. Reflexively, I placed my hand on her wrist, attempting to remove it before she punctured my vein. And then my birth mother screamed out in disbelief. When all of the children in the home gathered in the doorway, she told them that I had choked her and that I had tried to kill her. She then proceeded to choke me, lifting my 8-year-young body into the air and carried me to the wall closest to the group of children. She then began bashing my head into the wall repeatedly until I fell to the ground with blurry vision. My birth mother proceeded to repeatedly stomp on my face and head with her bare foot. Initially, I could partially see her foot coming down on my face, and I could hear the children scream in terror. But my vision went black as her foot continued to rain down on the side of my face, along my eyes and my jawline. Sometime later, I awoke in the bathroom with my sister from the foster home sitting on the toilet staring at me. She threw a piece of tissue at me and left me there to clean up my bloody face. Later, when I went into my birth mother's room to clean the bit of my blood that had spilled onto the baseboard and the floor, my birth mother yelled for me to stop and to leave it there, for me to be reminded of that incident every time she called me to fetch water for her or to care for her children. When I stayed up later that night, to tell my father about the incident and that I had almost died, all he said was, "Okay," without ever turning to look at me in the face. He responded nonchalantly, as if the abuse that I had experienced was normal, instead of taking me to a hospital to ensure that I didn't have a concussion. While living in my birth parents' custody from second grade to the end of freshman year, I experienced my father being verbally and primarily physically abusive to my birth mother when they were behind closed doors. The majority of the time that the abuse occurred, I heard the sound of her body being slammed into the wall or the sound of her whimpering until she ultimately fell silent. On one occasion, I thought that she had been beaten to death and called the police, and I quickly hung up. When the police arrived, my birth parents denied any claims of abuse, lied by saying that we, as in the children, were playing with the phone, and then abused me for calling the police for help after the police left. During this time frame, I also dealt with my birth mother, describing in detail how she was going to kill me and that she would quote unquote happily go to jail for doing so. I dealt with my birth father calling me out of the room that I shared with my sisters and asking me if I have any panties on, followed by him pulling my panties forward, placing his head close to my stomach so that he could stare down my underwear at my bare vagina. He would also tell me to turn around and to quote unquote let him see the back, referring to my butt cheeks. In addition to threatening to give me a quote unquote beat down, referring to corporal punishment done in the Caribbean, he would threaten to quote unquote watch me get undressed, place me in a cold shower, and beat me with a belt if I dared to turn off the water. He would describe this hypothetical scene to me enthusiastically and then ask, "Is that what you want? Do you want Daddy to watch you take a cold shower?" All the way into my freshman year of high school. My birth mother would stay up late at night so that when my father returned home from working hospital night shifts or being out with his friends, she could tell my father lies about my sister and I to make him abuse us. Therefore, I lived in fear every day of being sexually and physically abused by my birth father once he returned from work, in addition to actually being abused by one of my siblings and physically abused by my birth mother. Let me backtrack. Therefore, I lived in fear every day of being sexually and physically abused by my birth father once he returned from work, in addition to actually being abused by one of my siblings and being abused by my birth mother, both verbally and physically. On one occasion, when I was age 8 in the 3rd grade, my mother showed a new level of her violent nature by beating a cat to death. I was sleeping on a twin mattress with my sister from the foster home when I awoke to a thumping sound. My eldest sister had the top bunk bed to herself, and she awoke at the same time as us. We all spilled out into the hallway as the sound of a cat saying meow became softer and softer. We found my birth mother in the living room beating the cat to death with a broomstick as my birth father shouted her name. After the cat had gone silent and the beating stopped, my birth mother picked up the cat with a dustpan and threw it into the kitchen trash can. She then proceeded to light a match and toss it into the trash can to set the animal ablaze, right in front of my older siblings from the foster home and myself. My birth mother then instructed my eldest brother to throw the cat into the dumpster in the alley and to bring back the partially burnt plastic trash can. For the remainder of the school year that we lived in that apartment, the house smelled like a burnt animal carcass. I couldn't eat because I couldn't stomach what happened, nor the smell of a dead animal, which remained in the air. The very next day, I went to school and I told the child what happened. She told me to, quote unquote, not tell people that, and that it was weird. I hadn't learned that what I had experienced is actually called trauma. From that point forward, in the 3rd grade, I believed my birth mother when she stated that she would kill me because I had actually saw her kill something. I'm just gonna take like one moment because I'm like shaking right now and I just one moment. My birth mother's mental illness caused her to over-salivate, and she would create very large puddles of spit by her bedside. When she called me to fetch food or to do tasks for her, I would accidentally step in these puddles of warm spit. Her mental illness also caused her to yell at spirits or entities that none of us children could see. She often woke us up in the middle of the night telling us to quote unquote be still because the devil was right there or quote unquote in the room, causing us to lose sleep before school nights. She also believed that the devil was inside of things and would take the food from us while we were eating and throw it into the trash before we were done. On one occasion, when I was 7 and had just been transferred to my birth parents' custody, my birth mother took a bottle of apple juice from me out of her newborn son's mouth while he was drinking, due to her belief that the devil was inside of the juice. The baby began crying profusely out of hunger. Okay. Okay. I'm just gonna go back a little bit. On one occasion, when I was 7 and had just been transferred to my birth parents' custody, my birth mother took a bottle of apple juice from me out of her newborn son's mouth while he was drinking, due to her belief that the devil was inside of the juice. The baby began crying profusely out of hunger, and my older brother, who was the only other child home, turned around at me and said, "Star, make him shut up." As I rocked the child, I cried, "I can't, okay? I can't. He's hungry and he wants the bottle. She has the bottle, okay? She has the bottle." To which my birth mother took grave offense. She stopped in the middle of her argument with the devil, ran towards me, she ran towards me and hit me in the face with a closed fist. She had no concern for the fact that her newborn son was in my arms and could have dropped onto the floor. I had completely lost my vision and heard nothing but a ringing sound initially. But I told myself repeatedly, "Don't drop him, Star. Don't drop him." I had to find the strength to not clutch my face from the sheer pain of the slap in order to hold on to the baby so that he wouldn't suffer brain damage from a fall. Meanwhile, my birth mother didn't mind damaging me. I had to think like a parent, despite being a 7-year young child. This is how I remained in my birth parents' custody for 7.5 years, until the summer before my sophomore year of high school began. It was solely that I thought about my 3 youngest siblings and their well-being more than my own. I was waiting for my foster mother to come and get me. But by the age of 12 in the 7th grade, I had to look myself in the mirror, dry my eyes, and accept that it wasn't going to happen. We moved apartments once a year, which made me think that she wouldn't be able to find us. I had to remind myself that back in December 2006, when my sister and I were transferred from the foster home to my birth parents' custody, my foster mother sent us a box of all of our photos and keepsakes, which my birth mother instructed my eldest brother to throw into the dumpster. There was no consideration for how important it was for me to have memories of the first 8 years of my life and to know what I looked like as a baby. My foster mother also spoke to me around that same time on Christmas Day, and then she was told to never contact my sister and I again, otherwise someone would kill her. So in the 7th grade, I stopped hoping that anyone else would save me. I had already tried to tell the authorities at school when I was in the 5th grade, and my younger brother, who attended the same elementary school, arrived with bruises on his body one day. I was pulled from class, and I confessed to the social workers that we were being abused and neglected. I told them that if my birth parents found out that I told them, that we would all be severely beaten. The school contacted my birth parents to inform them later on that a report would be made before my brother and I had even walked home from school. Later that night, he and I were severely beaten along with the older children who had been foster youth in Miami. Thus, I had already lost hope by age 10 that any of the appropriate parties were going to do their job thoroughly and investigate. Thus, I had already lost hope by age 10 that any of the appropriate parties were going to do their job, thoroughly investigate, and pull my siblings and I from that toxic environment where we were starved, abused, neglected, and mistreated. I saw my birth mother throw a TV at her eldest son's head with no remorse. I saw my birth mother hide food in her bedroom and only feed the youngest 3 children when there was no food in the house. I saw my birth mother call my eldest sister a whore repeatedly. I saw my birth parents physically assault my birth sister together. I saw so much abuse regularly, and I believed that we were stuck in that fate. By the 7th grade, I became suicidal and developed a routine of going into the bathroom and holding a bottle of cleaning supplies after receiving a beating from my birth mother. I used to sob angrily at my inability to find the courage to drink the substance. I would worry that if I drank the chemicals and if I didn't die, then we would have a very high hospital bill and that my birth parents would definitely beat me extremely. Thus, I would cry and hold myself on the bathroom floor instead, then return to my daily routine of feeding, tutoring, bathing, and assisting my younger siblings with their needs, cleaning the entire apartment, then starting my homework after putting the children to bed around 9 p.m. By the time I was in middle school, I had developed full-blown insomnia due to stress, anxiety, and fear of my father coming home and physically or sexually abusing me if my birth mother wasn't satisfied with our behavior that day. That was my life. That was my childhood. Due to my birth parents' belief that, quote unquote, due to my birth parents' belief that, quote-unquote, girls don't need to go outside nor have friends, I was extremely sheltered as a child. Generally speaking, I was only allowed to leave the house to attend school, At least once per month, my older sisters and I were made to stay home from school to go grocery shopping or go to the laundromat because our parents didn't believe that it was as detrimental for us girls to miss school than it was for, or as it was for their sons to miss school. Despite being absent every trimester, oh, my battery's gonna die. Lovely. Despite being absent every trimester throughout grade school, I was still expected to excel academically and bring on my report card. Otherwise, I would be threatened with receiving a beatdown from my father. When I was age 8, he also told me that I had to get all A's and find my own way to afford college because, quote unquote, daddy cannot afford for 8 children to go to school. This only added immense stress and pressure on me as a small child who was being bullied at school and mercilessly abused at home on a regular basis. It was purely by my own will to thrive and appetite for life that I managed to maintain my status on high honor roll during every year of grade school and ultimately afford myself the grants and scholarships that permitted me to briefly attend university years later. So my battery actually died, so I just changed it. But I believe that I'm almost done, like at least more than 50% of the way through, so I'm glad, honestly. If you're still with me, thank you. Okay, I think I took this sentence. Okay, it's so late right now. Like I'm not even gonna say what time it is. Anyhow, I hope this is in focus. I really do, because I'm not doing this a third time. Third time is the charm, but not today. But no. It was solely my resilient nature and the realization that I would die in the hands of my birth parents if I didn't find a way out that I began to imagine, sketch, and plan a future for myself. From age 12 until age 14, when I was toward the end of the 8th grade, I looked forward to becoming a teenager so that I could secure a job. I was determined to earn myself a salary so that I could provide adequate food, school supplies, and clothes for myself since my father could not. From the 5th grade until my freshman year of high school, I wore the same jeans, the same shirts, and the same undergarments, even when they had become bloodstained after I started puberty. Due to my father's frequent threats of sexual abuse, I was uncomfortable with being near him or telling him the things that I needed, and due to his status as a sole provider for a household of 10 children, for a household of 10, let me backtrack. Due to my father's frequent threats of sexual abuse, I was uncomfortable with being near him or telling him the things that I needed, and due to his status as a sole provider for a household of 10, from a young age, he told me not to ask him for anything. I wore my shoes until the tape couldn't hold them together, or the Sharpie marker couldn't conceal the size of the holes in them. My physical appearance, my dental and feminine hygiene, and my overall wellness suffered immensely. Due to my parents' lack of education, they did not provide nutritional meals for us, nor did they buy raw fruits and vegetables for us children to eat during the 7.5 years that I lived with them. Yet, I understood that we were not being provided adequate care and that my birth parents were too egoistic, narcissistic, and violent to change their dysfunctional ways. The final straw that ultimately pushed me out of their care and their household was when I began working the summer after freshman year, and my birth parents threatened to beat me together. As I mentioned, I had begun planning my future since age 12 and looked forward to becoming 14 only so that I could walk to town hall and apply for a worker's permit on a non-school day. I believed that I would die in the house at the hands of my birth mother, who had choked me almost to death multiple times around the year 2013 when I was 14, and ultimately again in the summer of 2014 when I was age 15. The issue for my birth parents is that I had begun working at an aquatic center in a nearby suburb starting in June of 2014 and hadn't brought home a check after 3 weeks. One night in the summer, my birth father arrived home, and as per usual, my birth mother began telling him her complaints so that he would get upset at us children. He came into the room that I shared with my older sisters and threatened that if I didn't bring home a check in the next week, that he and my birth mother would give me a beat down together. I believed that they would certainly beat me to death, since they showed me the most apathy in the household, and they had taken turns punching my eldest sister in the stomach and slapping her in the face just months prior when she was 17. Therefore, I confided in my boss, who ultimately advised me to inform an adult who she trusted at the town hall due to his ability to alert my town's precinct of my situation. I wanted the police officers to know my name and my circumstance so that if they received a call about me being a quote-unquote teen runaway, then they would know not to label me as such due to my fear of that status ruining my chance of getting into a great university. I told the gentleman at the town hall meeting that I believed something bad was going to happen to me, and less than a week later the incident occurred. To put things succinctly, I returned to my birth parents' apartment one night, and to put things succinctly, I returned to my birth parents' apartment one night the following week and announced myself upon arrival as usual. My youngest sister also informed my birth mother that it was me at the door. Yet my birth mother proceeded to walk past me in the hallway, and when I said nothing to her, she began screaming and hallucinating. She stated that I attempted to push her and choke her, knowing that I never fought back. Excuse me. It feels like I have like pressure right here. Okay. To put things succinctly, I returned to my birth parents' apartment one night the following week and announced myself upon arrival as usual. My youngest sister also informed my birth sister that it was me at the door. Yet my birth mother proceeded to get up from her room, walk past me in the hallway, and when I said nothing to her, she began screaming and hallucinating. She stated that I attempted to push her and choke her, knowing that I never fought back during the abuse due to the belief that it would make the beatings last longer. I was deathly afraid of my birth parents and knew that speaking up or fighting back meant that they would permit themselves to beat me to death and blame me for it. Long story short, my birth mother began to threaten me as I made my way into my sister's room, stating that she was going to beat me with my birth father the moment that he came home from work. She started to yell for me to get out, and I told her to call the police, knowing that the precinct. She started to yell for me to get out, and I told her to call the police, knowing that the precinct had already been notified of me and my fear that tensions would arise in the household. My birth mother was startled at the audacity that I had to speak up for myself for once. Dumbfounded, she began scrambling for my eldest brother's cell phone and called my father, who was working a night shift. I then quickly texted my employer, who had just dropped me off, and asked if she could come pick me up. She waited for me in a nearby alleyway while I grabbed a small grocery bag full of clothes and a large trash bag of journals and song lyrics that I had created over the years. Then I fled into the night out of the back door while my birth mother was in her room trying to be patched through to my birth father. On my way out, my eldest brother said to me, quote unquote, You should have just stayed quiet. I am so glad that I spoke up for myself that day. It was 15 years late, considering that I had been severely mistreated and traumatized by almost everyone I had been housed with since I was born. Even in the next chapter of my life, I went on to be choked, verbally and emotionally abused by the woman who I was employed by during the 3 years that I lived with her. She went from being my employer to seeming like my savior and becoming my legal guardian until I became an emancipated minor 1 year into her custody during my junior year of high school at age 16. However, by the end of junior year, my temporary legal guardian had created yet another toxic living environment for me, which I struggled to thrive within. Similarly to the previous adults, she exploited me by forcing me to work for her company and disallowing me to seek employment elsewhere when I expressed that I was uncomfortable with working for her and her racist ex-husband. I was told that I had to work for her company as a way to contribute to the household, although she took my food stamps card from the beginning of my emancipation and I had already volunteered to work elsewhere and give her a percentage of my paycheck. She told me that I was quote unquote more valuable to her as an employee of her company and not as an employee of someone else's. So I juggled being a full-time student in a 4-year college prep program while being a full-time employee who worked whenever my boss worked since I lived with her. I was not paid more, but expected to handle payroll, money counting, restocking, housekeeping, and any tasks that she commanded me to do. My temporary guardian and her husband often verbally fought in front of all of us children that they hired, which was triggering for me and discomforting for us all to witness. I also overheard them physically fight in the basement level of their home and overheard her say things to her husband like, quote unquote, that's why you found your mom dead on Christmas, and quote unquote, that's why you're retarded like your sister, your whole family is retarded. I also heard him say racist comments like, all you need are some grape juice and hot Cheetos with that sandwich. And quote unquote, well, was he black? Well, then there you go. That's why. My temporary legal guardian also found it funny to call me a niglet on occasion. As a brown-skinned Caribbean Latina born to 2 immigrant parents, I of course found their common use of slurs and prejudice, racist statements, I found their common use of slurs and prejudice and racist statements to be unnerving. I also felt uncomfortable residing in a home with 2 people who did not see my humanity before they saw my brown skin. But I did not hesitate to call her a niglet right back. Around the time that the couple prepared for divorce, my former guardian began dating a man on the Plenty of Fish dating app. She flew with him to California under the guise of laying to rest her father who had just passed. However, she extended her trip for weeks to enjoy her vacation while leaving me to work for her business, manage payroll, care for 2 dogs, maintain the domestic tasks, and reside with her racist husband, all the while juggling major standardized tests at the end of my junior year of high school. While she was away, her husband asked me if while she was away, her husband asked me if she had ever said anything to me prior to me living with them that made me dislike him. I covered for her by gently stating that she had only expressed some frustrations when in reality she would badmouth him in front of all of us teenagers that worked for her who were aged 14 through 17. When my temporary guardian returned home, they briefly spoke in their basement level office before she stormed upstairs and began verbally accosting me. She began to swear at me and asked what I told her husband while she was gone as she stood over me inside of my bedroom. Her husband raced upstairs and attempted to stand in between us as I attempted to get up from the floor and make sense of what had made her so furious. She began lunging at me. And when her husband stood in the way, she said, "What's this, huh? What's this? What'd you guys do? Fuck while I was gone?" I was freshly 17 at the time, and her husband was 42 years old, which means that would have been sexual assault. He scoffed and attempted to pull her away while I scurried out of my little 10 by 10 size bedroom. My temporary guardian ran after me and proceeded to choke me right outside of my bedroom in front of her husband. Having been choked by my birth mother several times, I stared into her eyes and told her to get her hands off of me, which she ultimately did. The next day was the last day of my junior year of high school. I went to school, attended my final meeting with the social worker, and attempted to downplay the abuse due to the habit that I had developed of protecting my abusers. However, the social worker reported the abuse to the appropriate parties, and ultimately, a social worker came to interview the three of us. The two adults lied about not being violent towards one another, and my temporary guardian lied about the incident when she choked me. I was also pressured to lie to the social worker prior to the meeting by my temporary guardian, who made it clear that I wouldn't be able to live with her during my senior year of high school, and that she wasn't the type to quote unquote be in the system, so I needed to quote unquote make the mess go away. I didn't think that the woman social worker would believe the lies, but she very easily did. Long story short, my former guardian and her husband divorced at the start of my senior year, and the man that she met from the dating app moved in the same day with his dog on the same day that her ex-husband left. It was during my final year of high school that it became apparent to me that I had fallen into the hands of abusive, exploitative people every step of the way in my life. My former guardian was no different, and her treatment towards me only worsened when her new boyfriend moved in. After the divorce, she became more agitated about not having sufficient steady income. I believe she only allowed the man from the dating app to move in because of his pension from his time as a police officer, but it wasn't enough. She began to operate Airbnb out of her home and often pressured me to quote unquote go entertain the male guests as if I were part of their room stay package. She repeatedly allowed men from around the country and people from around the world into the home, which forced me to spend a lot of time in my 10 by 10 room due to feeling unsafe. Some of those men were not shy about wanting to be quote unquote close to me, despite me being a teenage girl. Her boyfriend would also walk around with his bathrobe open and only the strings covering his genital area. The two of them would drink alcohol and occasionally gave me wine and IPA beers, which I drank right in front of them. On one occasion, involving an Airbnb guest, my former guardian coerced me into smoking out of an erect, penis-style pipe that looked precisely like a dildo sex toy. Excuse me. It's just like I can feel myself just getting so angry as I relive all of this. Excuse me. That's why I keep fumbling over my words. Anywho, I'm going to continue reading now. On one occasion, involving an Airbnb guest, my former guardian coerced me into smoking out of an erect penis-style pipe that looked precisely like a dildo sex toy. It belonged to a gay man who was a teacher and happened to be a long-term guest who stayed with us for months. I was called out of my room and told to come outside by my former guardian, who excitedly took turns sucking and smoking on the penis pipe while the guest who owned the pipe and her boyfriend watched and all. Her boyfriend, who also sucked on the pipe, described the balls of the pipe as not being quote unquote as big as his, to which my former guardian affirmed and giggled like a child. She then placed the pipe in front of me on the other side of the table and pulled out her cell phone to take a picture of it in front of me. I wasn't amused and adamantly stated that I didn't want to touch nor smoke from it. Both my former guardian and her boyfriend pressured me by saying that it's not real and to quote unquote just put my mouth on it. I became frustrated by their peer pressure and immaturity, and I decided to leave. While I hurried inside of the house through the kitchen side door, my former guardian ran after me, shouting my name furiously. While we were inside, she asked me why I was being a quote-unquote Debbie Downer and stated that I was giving the guest a bad experience. She told me that I was taking things too seriously. I told her that I didn't like the pipe and that I found it to be objectifying people's private parts. I told her that if it were a vagina-shaped pipe, then I would not put my mouth on it either, to which she yelled, "Well, why not?" I proceeded to lock myself in the room for the rest of the night. My former guardian was not concerned with my feelings on the matter, nor did she consider my history of sexual abuse. I was clearly uncomfortable and found it deplorable that the guest was a teacher who allowed two adults to pressure me to smoke marijuana out of a penis pipe in front of him. My former guardian is the same one who introduced me to weed just 2 months into me being in her custody by smoking with me when I was 15. She stated that I was quote-unquote going to end up doing it anyway, but I actually had no desire to do so since my birth parents were very strict religious folks who didn't believe in drinking nor smoking. The reality is that she didn't want to hide that she was smoking weed in her house at the time, so she put it into my hands and allowed her 19-year-old son to smoke with me in his bedroom so that she wouldn't feel guilty about smoking. The actions of this woman were egregious and careless back in 2014 when I was smoking at age 15 and once again at age 17 when she attempted to force me to smoke out of a penis pipe for the entertainment of her and 2 grown men. Her actions were also egregious when she threw my trauma in my face while we were sitting outside of a Costco in the parking lot. She asked me why I was wearing jeans when it was so hot outside, to which I responded, "I don't like my legs." When she asked why not, I explained that it was because of bruises, scars, and the darker complexion of my knees due to hyperpigmentation. She then responded by saying, "Well, then maybe you shouldn't have been on your knees sucking your foster brother's dick," and began laughing hysterically. I sat there, holding back 1,000 tears as we were preparing to go into the store. She had often made jokes about her older sister violating her sexually by performing cunnilingus on her with a flashlight and a tutorial book when she was a child. So she deemed it okay to make light of something so traumatic and personal that I had shared with her after we had begun living together. I sat there, stone cold in the face and unamused, to which she responded that I needed to quote-unquote lighten up and that it was just a joke. However, I did not perform any sexual acts on my foster brother. It wasn't a case of 2 children engaging inappropriately in sexual acts. It was a coordinated attack on my body by an older child who knew that he was wrong. It was rape. And rape is never funny or to be made light of. I'm just going to take a minute. By the time I had reached the end of my senior year, I had no support system and no foundation, just anxiety as to how I was going to graduate and carry on into the world as a young adult with so much trauma, poor socialization, PTSD, and no steady stream of income due to the nature of my former guardian's seasonal business. When graduation came around, I didn't think it was important to attend because I had no safe, secure form of transportation. Throughout high school, I relied on the bus and Ubers as a form of transit. During the week of graduation, my former guardian said to me, "Hey, so you're not planning to go to graduation, right? Because I don't feel like sitting in traffic for 3 hours just to watch you walk across the stage for 5 minutes." And just as I had the tendency to do, I considered another person's wants and feelings over my own. I washed away any idea of a plan and said, "Oh no, I wouldn't want you to sit in traffic for hours either. It's okay, I won't go. So I did not attend my high school graduation and preserve that memory. I didn't think it mattered. I thought that I had already done what I was supposed to do by earning a diploma. I recalled how sad it made me to walk across the stage during my 8th grade graduation and to have not a group nor a person there in the audience for me. I thought that I should save myself the embarrassment of having no one to clap for me. Not realizing that my wonderful teachers and the high school faculty would have happily cheered for me on that day. I can never get that moment back in time. And it was robbed of me by someone who knowingly took in a child who she had no intentions of properly guiding through her adolescence and into her young adulthood. I finally got away from my legal guardian almost 1 year later in late March of 2018. To put things succinctly, I had gone off to college after the summer of 2017, but I had to leave campus after 2 weeks due to an error in my tax documents, which caused the university to rescind my financial aid. They initially offered to cover 85% of my tuition. However, after the error was quickly corrected, the financial aid office couldn't guarantee me the same award amount. I was instructed to pay out of pocket approximately $3,000 for the time that I had already been on campus, which I couldn't do due to my balance of $1,200 at the time. I also knew that my former guardian was planning to liquidate her house and her business and move back to California with her family. Thus, I chose to leave school and search for work. I decided to use the remainder of the year as a gap semester so that I could write my poetry collection and personal development course, which I began writing that summer of 2017 as an attempt to heal from my traumatic childhood. My former guardian was not in support of anything related to self-love or personal development, nor did she value my art as a creative writer. She became increasingly irritated with me every month from October 2017 until my departure in March 2018 due to my lack of income. Despite me working, catering events for her company, being the housekeeper for her Airbnb operations, and her using my SNAP food stamps card to buy charcuterie board toppings for her and her boyfriend, she stated that my contributions weren't enough. Thus, she began insisting that I go to the DHS, the Department of Human Services, office and lie to them by telling them that I was poor and homeless so that I could qualify for an emergency food stamps card. I informed her many times that the process does not work like that and that due to my being in a probationary period of 3 months, I couldn't be eligible, or I wouldn't be eligible to apply until the period ended. Therefore, one morning in late March 2018, she came upstairs and expressed her frustrations with me. I was dressed and ready to go to the DHS office to appease her, but I knew in my spirit that it was a waste of time. She began to follow me into the bathroom, hurling insults at I was dressed and ready to go to the DHS office to appease her, but I knew in my spirit that it was a waste of time. She began to follow me into the bathroom, hurling insults at me and blocking me from passing through the doorway by raising her arms along the door frame. I began visibly shaking due to the high intensity, which I cannot handle due to my long-standing PTSD. She mocked me for shaking and chased me into my bedroom, then ultimately outside of the house, hurling insults at me all the way into my Uber driver's car. I went to the library where I discovered that she had turned off my phone service so that I couldn't communicate with anyone. This woman put me in danger for not wanting to commit a crime by going to the Department of Human Services office and lying about my welfare in order to receive money, and thought it was justifiable to disrupt my ability to call anyone else for help. Long story short, I contacted a friend who allowed me to stay with her father in an unfinished room in the unfinished basement of his apartment. So I returned to my former guardian's house after meeting with my friend's father, and I attempted to resolve things amicably. I simply wanted to break the pattern of having to leave a living arrangement running into the middle of the night, fearing for my life, and have a mature conversation before parting ways. However, she was more interested in accosting me further, as if to put on a show for her boyfriend, who she allowed to verbally accost me as well. It wasn't until he went downstairs that she arrived back to the main level with a completely different demeanor and practically begged me not to leave the house. I informed her that I would be gone the next day and locked myself in my little 10 by 10 bedroom to pack for the rest of the night. My former guardian made my departure more difficult by sabotaging me on my way out the following evening. She interrogated me about who I was going to live with and became livid when I finally shared the name of the friend and her father whose building I was permitted to stay in temporarily. She said to me, "You know what, Star? You no longer have the luxury of time," and began to throw my neatly packed belongings off of the balcony onto the driveway. When that didn't deter me, she slapped me in the face 10 to 12 times, asking me, "What are you going to do about it? What you going to do about it? What you going to do about it? What you going to do about it? Huh? What you going to do about it? What you going to do about it?" When that didn't deter me, she ripped the bag out of my hand, which caused my 2 fingernails to be bent backwards. But due to the high intensity and adrenaline rush, I didn't know nor feel myself bleeding. To make matters worse for me, my former guardian called the police and lied to the dispatcher by stating that she had a teenage girl in her home whose quote unquote whole family was in the system and who was being quote unquote aggressive. She asked them to hurry and told them that I was being hostile while I gathered the last of my things in my bedroom, which she had clearly rummaged through and stolen from. When I attempted to leave, she put her arms up along the doorway, just as she had done the previous day when I began shaking in the bathroom. I started to scream for her not to touch me and pushed past her to go outside. That is when her boyfriend, a former police officer, stood up and lunged towards me as if he was going to hurt me. He stepped onto the balcony and stated that I quote unquote disgusted him. He had nothing to say to the woman who he watched harass me and hurt me, then lied to the police about it. The police arrived very quickly with their hands on their guns, ready to shoot me. It wasn't until I handed one officer my ID that my blood gushed out from my broken nails onto my ID, causing the officer to grow alarmed and show concern. However, the trauma of having the police wrongfully called on me and hearing the sirens as they came for me had already settled in. It didn't help that my former guardian forbade the officers from retrieving the majority of my belongings, forcing me to have to grab them later. One of the officers literally said to me to come back another time when it's quote unquote not a Friday night to have an officer assist me with the retrieval of my belongings. The very next day, my former guardian put all of my belongings outside on the balcony, knowing that it was going to rain, and texted me a screenshot of the forecast, along with a message stating that she would not be moving any of my things back into the house if I didn't come to retrieve them. From that point forward, at age 19, I have been fully responsible for myself and unable to fully trust adults who claim to want to help me. My friend's father went on to wrongfully evict me in 2019 as well, despite the irony of him being there to assist during my former guardian's wrongful eviction of me the year prior in 2018. During the 1 year that I lived with him, he exploited me by giving me a verbal lease so that he could adjust the terms of my living arrangement whenever he saw fit. He also charged me hundreds of dollars for an incomplete room without proper frames on the window and a large crawl space that allowed bugs and cold air in, knowing that he nor my retail employer paid me enough. I was at his mercy and expected to do landscaping, care for his 2 dogs, work for his company, clean his house, and quote unquote drop everything when he tells me, since that is the nature of his business. I was 19, working a retail job and working for his company, yet neither stream of income paid me enough to eat adequate meals nor have any funds for personal care items once I paid my bills. Miraculously, I still made the time to publish my debut poetry collection during that same summer of 2018 at age 19 and cultivate more skills like making body butter so that I could make $12 occasionally and use that to buy groceries. My friend's father ultimately kicked me out in the spring of 2019 because he believed that I didn't quote unquote drop everything fast enough when he needed me, although I completed the entire proposal that he asked me to prepare for him on my 1 day off. He gave me a quote unquote 90-day notice by emailing me that he was quote unquote deeply upset by the shit that went down and stated that at the end of that message that it served as a 90-day notice. This man was a process server who knew for a fact that a 90-day notice cannot be served in the form of a text message and that he had to take me to eviction court if he wanted to properly remove me from the home since I received mail there. He was exploiting the fact that I didn't know my rights at the time and had agreed to leave by July 1st, 2019. I only learned of my rights after I had gone to town hall in July 2019, around the time that my friend's family helped me move out. I placed my belongings into a storage unit with the help of a friend and lived with a different friend's family for 12 days until I secured an apartment in June of 2019. In July of 2019, so later that month. I lived in my first apartment for 5 years from age 20 to 25. I had no intentions of staying that long due to its poor condition, but remained there for many years due to unemployment during the global coronavirus pandemic that lasted from 2020 until the year 2022. I also didn't realize that I was paying $1,000 too much for a basement level unit that was hardly habitable because I had no parental or wise adult guidance. I literally had the help of my teenage friends when I moved in, all of whom were more impressed that I had my own place than they were able to see what was wrong with it. It was poorly lit with inadequate natural and artificial light. The refrigerator was rusty at the bottom. The slumlord that I had for a landlord lied and stated that the place had been professionally painted. He had the utilities for my place under the control of the upstairs tenants, therefore I had no control of the temperature, which was often too cold. The place was too humid. The walls were too thin, giving me and the upstairs tenants very little privacy. But the worst part is that the infrastructure of the roof had been compromised, so my bedroom would flood with water when it rained heavily. Due to the landlord's failure and refusal to remove the flooded carpet in the unit, 3 types of fatal black mold grew inside of my bedroom, along the closet wall, and inside of the HVAC system. From the summer of 2023 until I moved out in October 2024, I experienced sharp splenic pain, dizziness, lightheadedness, and other symptoms of a mold infection every day. I have done numerous extensive tests, although to no avail because the results conflict with one another, and I have yet to see a specialist. I have had to nurse myself and self-medicate daily with medicinal herbs and pain relief creams and patches, which I don't always have the money to buy. My former landlord was able to go without being held accountable for being a slumlord because he was able to motion to evict me due to non-payment, and I didn't have the proper legal representation to bring forth the insurmountable evidence that I had of his neglect in violation of my tenant's rights. So ultimately, we settled and I agreed to leave. I mention this because it has become clear to me this year that in every chapter of my life, the adults who knew and should have done better have gotten away with abusing me due to my status as the less fortunate one in the circumstance who was in survival mode and unable to stand up for myself at the time. I am outraged and upset. My radiator is turning on right now. I'm going to give it a moment because I don't want this noise to I don't want it to make noise like that when I edit this. I know it's good. My camera will pick it up. So I'm just going to give it a moment. Oh my gosh. Okay, my radiator started making noise, but I'm almost done, so I'm just going to try to read a little bit louder. Hopefully it won't be loud on the camera when I edit this. Anyway, so I'm going to continue reading now. Don't mind the noise, I apologize. I mention this because it has become clear to me this year that in every chapter of my life, the adults who knew and should have done better have gotten away with abusing me due to my status as the less fortunate one in the circumstance who was in survival mode and unable to stand up for myself at the time. I am outraged and upset by the fact that they all knew that they were abusing, violating, and exploiting me, a child who had no one, and the fact that they didn't mind doing so. This year, in 2025, at the age of 26, I have discovered that the reason that I have been struggling with adulting is entirely connected to the trauma that I've experienced at the hands of the adults who traumatized me instead of parenting me. Nobody raised me. I didn't grow up. Instead, I merely struggled up. Oh, now it stopped making noise. Awesome. And now I appear in life as a high-functioning, articulate, strong, capable young lady. However, I still feel like the deeply wounded girl who is afraid that someone is going to abuse me for no reason. I can't simply do day-to-day things in life without the fear of harm and unwarranted attacks happening to me. This is because of all of the violence inflicted upon me. This is because of the fact that all of the violence that was inflicted upon me was unwarranted. And it wasn't until just last year in October that I got away from the last adult that I trusted that turned out to exploit me financially, since he saw me as an easy teenage target instead of as a tenant whose rights he should honor. I've spoken to numerous therapists from 2018 to this year, many of whom confirm that I show signs of severe PTSD. But it hasn't been until this year and in recent weeks that I have discovered that the root cause of this weight of trauma, fear, and anxiety stems from the Florida judge's failure to place me in a proper foster home with a loving, trusting adult who actually wanted to care for me. Instead, the judge placed me into an illegitimate, illegal foster home with two women who were regularly abusive to all of us small children, and all of the caseworkers overlooked this grave error. Then, to sabotage my welfare as a child even further, a Florida judge placed me into the hands of my abusive, narcissistic, incompetent birth parents, where my life was threatened almost daily by my psychopathic, deranged, violent birth mother. It is no surprise that I continued to fall into the hands of adults who exploited and abused me, just as my birth parents had done. It's almost a miracle that I am alive today, especially after surviving being held at gunpoint during a home invasion in the 6th grade when I was age 10. My life has been laced with trauma and tragedy due to no fault of my own. Yet, perennially, I am the one who has been left to pick up the pieces and carry on. But I am struggling with that part. I believe that my inner child will not find resolve nor inner peace without me stepping forward and holding all of the responsible parties accountable as a young lady today. I am aware that Florida has a discovery rule, and I am aware that the laws recently changed regarding claims for sexual abuse incidents that occurred under the age of 16. Well, I was assaulted by my foster brother at age 5, and it has been a stain on my life ever since. The violation that I experience is largely the reason that I do not trust men, do not want to be married, nor have children, nor can I imagine myself trusting that a man won't hurt me nor my hypothetical child if I ever became a mother. I have no faith in this justice system. Given the blatant failures of the legal system that took custody of me, then handled me so irresponsibly throughout my childhood. It was Florida State that elected to become my parent by removing me from my birth parents' custody and making me a ward of the state. Thus, it was Florida State and its appropriate agencies that should have provided me with adequate care, support, and a healthy, safe home where I could feel secure and be able to thrive before and after they made the decision to transfer me like cargo across state lines in the middle of the night, offering me nothing but a cheap airplane Caesar salad for comfort. The state of Illinois and DCFS failed me even further by not acting to terminate my birth parents' rights when they learned of the children that they had retrieved from the foster home after the state of Illinois had just presented insurmountable evidence demonstrating that my birth parents were parentally unfit. If they could see that my birth parents were unfit to raise their sixth child, then they had to have known that they couldn't properly raise any of us, especially when the caseworkers testified exactly that in the November 2006 court hearing. Yet they left me there. Florida State and Illinois State left me to be severely abused, raped, molested, starved, malnourished, neglected, traumatized, and running into the night with nothing but fear dripping from my eyes in the form of tears at age 15. And now, 10 years later, the same tears fall from my eyes. But I am not 15 anymore. I am a young adult now who can function, but cannot trust people to not subject me to the same forms of abuse that I have endured. I feel afraid of this world and don't know how I'm supposed to protect myself within or traverse throughout it. I cannot imagine how I'm supposed to live like this for the rest of my adulthood. But after making the connections between the anxiety and post-traumatic stress that cripples me now and the trauma that I experienced for the past 25 years, I now know that I should not have to pick up the pieces all by myself. I am not the one who caused this mess. My birth mother undoubtedly should have, at the very least, she should have aborted me. My birth father should have been jailed for repeatedly beating and impregnating a psychopath, mentally ill, illiterate woman who didn't even know the proper name for her diagnosis nor the day of the week. I was robbed of my childhood and don't even have one photo to know what I looked like as a child. I have no biological family nor bloodline to be proud of. I can't answer basic questions about where my parents are from when getting to know people. I seem like an alien and I feel like one. I feel like a human embodiment of fragments. I have to learn about myself from court documents and child welfare records like I was an experiment gone wrong and not a human being. This is not normal. This is painful. I should have never been birthed into such catastrophic dysfunction, yet I was. But it was ultimately the state agencies that failed me even more by placing me into these unsuitable, illegitimate, illegal, hazardous, abusive environments, even after being made aware numerous times that the adults and living conditions were not suitable for children. It's disgraceful and a great display of systemic failure and conscious indifference that the judges, the state agencies, the caseworkers, the professionals, and other involved parties weren't held accountable for their violations of my human rights as a child, given that their gross negligence has scarred me for the past 26 years and serve as a stain on the rest of my life. What troubles me further is that I've carried this pain for 26 years due to not realizing the severity of my experiences and due to the shame I felt for experiencing them. I am not the one who should be ashamed. I refuse to let my silence enable these entities to create more victims. I am unapologetically advocating for the little girl that I was, who never had the chance nor the safety net to speak up for myself. And I have so much to say now. Thank you.
In an instant, anatomy all I see in a light skin.